Hello everyone, my name is La Peng, an Internet Monsoon VPP. Welcome back to episode 2 of AAPI History. Today's topic, we'll be talking about the California Gold Rush, Chinese immigration, and the effects it had on history. When gold was discovered in California, it marked new beginnings for people across the globe. Many of these people had immigrated to the US, to California, to participate. Many of these immigrants were from China. By 1852, more than 25,000 Chinese people had migrated to California to participate. But by then, the amount of surface gold dwindled and they had turned to mining in the ground. Independent miners then became wage workers, and as jobs and gold became more scarce, anti-immigrant sentiments grew. Why, you may ask? Well, history lesson, the immigrant is always willing to work for less. And to quote Hamilton, immigrants, we get the job done. But not without massive xenophobia. This anti-immigrant sentiment eventually led to violence between the white people and the Chinese people. As violence grew, Chinese people were driven away from the mines and into enclaves in cities such as San Francisco. One of the culminating events of this violence was the Rock Spring Massacre in Wyoming, where a mob of angry workers tricked many Chinese immigrants and miners and boxed them in. They were targeted and over 28 Chinese people were killed, although some estimate it was over 40 to 50. The mob marched through Chinatown in Wyoming and laid waste to it, burning over 79 shacks. This sentiment continued to grow as the Transcontinental Railroad began construction. Whites and Chinese were in competition for jobs on the railroad, but the Chinese proved to be tireless workers who were willing to work for low wages. Employers liked to hire Chinese laborers, but this further exacerbated the tensions between immigrants and whites. The Chinese were used as disposable laborers, often being sent to use dynamite to clear the way for railing and dying in the process. The Transcontinental Railroad was finished with this iconic photo. Notice that not a single Asian worker is in it. These tensions evolved into the passage of the 1875 Page Act, which banned the immigration of Chinese women who were deemed immoral, and the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese laborers into the United States. This didn't abate all tensions, though. Chinese immigrants who had previously arrived in the United States were forced to adhere to this act. Any Chinese persons who had left the United States had to get re-entry certifications, and the act effectively made Chinese immigrants permanent aliens by denying them U.S. citizenship. In fact, after the Civil War, a passage of the 14th and 15th Amendment was said to guarantee voting rights for every man. But this is one of the biggest myths, not only because of voter repression, but because the right to vote requires citizenship, and anybody who was not a white person of good moral character or of African descent would not be a U.S. citizen. This effectively excluded all Asian people, Pacific Islanders, Latinx people, etc. This citizenship law did not fully disappear until 1952. But we'll discuss voter suppression in another video. Now, let's get into the Page Act of 1875. It was the first restrictive immigration law in the United States passed, banning Chinese women from immigrating. This ban effectively became a barrier for East Asian immigrant women, further dehumanizing them. The American Medical Association claimed that Chinese immigrants had carried over diseases that they could spread, but they themselves were immune to. This preceded the future Chinese Exclusion Act that banned immigration of Chinese men 7 years later. To justify the Page Act, it was said to end cheap Chinese labor and immoral Chinese women. This sexualization of Asian women as prostitutes or of objects is a trend we still see today. Asian women are fetishized and seen as exotic. The Atlanta shootings in March of 2020, where 8 women were killed and 6 of whom were Asian, is the latest example in which objectification of Asian women leads to massive violence. Dismantling stereotypes like this are the first steps to addressing them. So who gets away with murder in history? From the Boston Massacre, which is always condemned, to the Rock Spring Massacre, which few know about. From some police officers who had no problem killing people of color, such as Tamir Rice or George Floyd, to the cop who claimed the Atlanta shooter who killed Asian women in 2021 just had a bad day. We actively choose who we hold accountable in history and who we hold accountable today. Hypocrisy in history doesn't have to be repeated. We get to shape a world we live in and the history that kids will learn generations from now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.